Thanks everyone for coming. I'm Tri Mahlakaib. I am here as the moderator. I'm not an EdTech expert. I'm so glad that I have two excellent people here who are experts in that field. I call here Heli, Aru-Chabilan, and David Kelver. Let's make them an applause. And thank you. And the three of us are here to talk more about the buzzword AI and then how it affects the educational sector. But I guess our goal here today is to really take the hype out of AI and see what has been done successfully, how we can implement and where AI at all in educational sector, what are the limitations, and the second part is for you. I would really like to understand first of all who we have here. So let's raise our hands if we have here people who call themselves teachers. If you're in front of the classroom. Thanks for coming. Do we have here investors? No, a few, yes. We'll talk about investments in the EdTech field as well, perhaps. Do we have here EdTech entrepreneurs or startups? Okay, and who are the rest of the people? Why are you here? Do we have here technologists who are machine learning experts? Yes, we need you as well. Please pitch in during the conversation. Let us know what are the limitations. And before we begin our discussion, I have a lot of questions. I'm very interested how AI can be implemented in EdTech. But I'd also like to know what are your expectations. So we have here a lot of mics. And during the sessions, please raise your hand, pitch in, discuss with us. If you're not satisfied with something, tell us. So a few questions for those who are here, really, what do you want to get out of it? Do you want to more understand how to implement AI in education? Is that the thing? Give me a nudge. Do you want to understand if technologies should be implemented in educational sector, if at all? Should we experiment with AI in education? What else is there? Sir, what would you like to get out of this session?
I want to know how we involve AI in education, what we can do and where we will start.
Okay. But I guess we can start. We can take our seats. I kindly ask you to pitch in as well and say your questions, raise your hand, and I'm going to show where you can get the mic. Before we begin, I'd like to start with Heli. Heli, would you please tell us what is your background and how you became the experts in the EdTech field?
Well, I have to confess that I really don't consider myself an expert in EdTech. I'm coming from the national agency who has a mission to support educational institution in transferring, to have a digital transfer properly implemented. This is a private foundation established by the government, by the two major universities and the ICT companies in Estonia. And I've been with this organization now for 2 years, and by professional training, I'm actually coming from social science background, and I've done in my master's some education policy issues, focusing on those.
What about you, David? I think I see that you're promoting here a startup. So why are you using that linguist label today?
Just a touch of guerrilla marketing on that one. So my name is David Kelver. I am a senior manager with Rakuten. By a show of hands, how many people here actually know Rakuten? Okay, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. How many people here follow football? Okay. Apparently, we're supposed to have around a 90% brand recognition among European football fans. So I actually am based in Tokyo, and with Rakuten, we are quite well known for our Englishanization program. So about 10 years ago or so, our CEO kind of did a forced transformation of the language from Japanese to English, and we were one of the pioneers for doing large-scale corporate language transformation. And that kind of started pushing us into education because we needed to match results with the tools and techniques and time that was being invested into language education. So the education business at Rakuten kind of grew out of that initial concept. And what I do at Rakuten is I do a lot of market research and partnership development. We have an investment with Linguist in Estonia, which is an AI language learning company. So we do a lot of work with them, and I do work on the board of directors for Linguist. So I do have some experiences here in Estonia working with them. So that's my background with Rakuten and education. Much more on the technology side, research, and then matching business models to real solutions that can work, and then advising on if we can improve people's existing ideas.
And those people joining us, thanks for coming. If there are some seats here, you can move closer to us to engage better. Also, those of you who are wondering, we hear about AI and robots taking our jobs. Hopefully, at the end of this panel, we also have an answer if there is a job for teachers in the future. But EdTech is not a new term. It has been around, let's say, a decade or even more. There have been improvements long time ago when radio was trying to, they were trying to think that radio will replace teachers, and now they're thinking that AI will replace teachers. To set the background, what has been the most biggest improvements in the field of EdTech in the past 10 years? Are there some big changes or other just like minor things happening in the field? What do you see changing?
Well, I think we should start a bit broader. I mean, how has technology as such changed education? And probably the answer is actually not so clear-cut that it has, as we would like to say. But there are several reasons why is it so. But Estonia, on the other hand, if you are not so good even with implementing the technology in education and having this kind of a personal education for each and every learner, then the digitalization as such has been in agenda for almost 20 years now, and with some remarkable successes. In a previous panel in the Blue Room, Edeshank Tamkivi mentions that ICT is a popular field in Estonia, and 9% of all the university students they go and study ICT. This is a top number in OECD areas. And government and the private sector has invested a lot of money and activities which has actually made ICT so popular. Last year, we carried out a survey in Estonian schools, and it turned out that only 5% of Estonian students don't use technology at all in teaching. Only 5%. But it doesn't mean that 95% do it regularly and do it wisely and with very good results on the learning outputs. There are cultural reasons behind that, but there are also reasons that the technology is very often still viewed as a kind of just a tool. But it has to be so much more integrated. It has to be seen really as a solution for some problems. Not just introducing the tech as such. And I'm afraid very often it has been so far the case that we have been introducing technology as some kind of a new, interesting, innovative thing, and that doesn't necessarily bring a good results in all the schools.
I would, from my perspective, I would kind of, I want to give you a little bit more of a boring answer, but a boring answer that hopefully lays a bit of foundation for some additional discussion points we will have in the future. I look at drivers that created massive change in education that allowed technology to really get into the school systems and to really create kind of the critical mass. You understand the concept of critical mass, having enough users or enough of a marketplace to allow kind of companies to be seeding in there and then start growing and developing their products. There's two massive changes that I think really impacted education technology within the last 10 years or so. One was the initiative, it started a lot in the United States, but also Europe and other parts of North America, Canada. And it was the initiative to really put Wi-Fi technology in the schools. And that was enabled by basically commoditization of hardware and simplification of the installation process. And what that did was suddenly schools had access to Wi-Fi, and that brought out the portability of devices. And all these ed tech providers suddenly looking and seeing, wow, here's an opportunity that we have children in schools and teachers in schools and administrators with these devices, and now we're looking for content. So a major driver of that would have been the sudden explosion of Wi-Fi technology throughout the schools and really enabling devices. Another one it's a major one, more on the B2C side, is portability and moving from kind of desktops into the mobile phones. So there was a lot of people who had simple ideas and had kind of limited content sets. And once we went from the expectation that you had to have this full, complete system in your PC version, going to the smartphones allowed people to kind of more narrow in and focus on niche product sets. And that really allowed a lot of companies with small groups and small teams to enter the ed tech space and really participate.
Okay, but as the topic of this panel is AI in education, let's dig deeper. Heli, you said that AI or these algorithms doesn't work on their own. There should be a solution. They should be looked as a tool. So let's look at these algorithms. And everyone today is talking about recommendations algorithms. You guys are using it in Hulu, in Netflix, in Spotify. And these algorithms work very well. They suggest you music, movies. So Heli and David, how do you see what can these recommendation algorithms and personalization precisely do in education? Can we even apply these smart algorithms in education? What kind of problems can they solve?
Well, it definitely gives a greater control of the learning process for me as a learner. It gives me instant feedback, whether I was right in giving some answers. It corrects me instantly, and it makes the whole learning process much more dynamic. And there's this instant gratification or instant learning opportunity. It gives really a sense that I'm in charge of the process, and this is a very powerful feeling when you are learning.
So who is benefiting more of these recommendation algorithms? As I understand from your point of view, is it students or teachers? Whose benefit is here? Who gains from these algorithms?
Well, there are different ways in this game how to use them. And in some cases, there are learners, the individuals who benefit. In some cases, there are teachers. In some cases, for admin purposes, there are actually institutions who get larger market share because of doing some recruitment process cleverly. So, I mean, it really depends from what perspective you are looking. It just has enormous potential. But of course, you need to be also very skillful in using it.
I would add into that with the personalization, there's a requirement for some type of outcome to be set. The school has to set an outcome, and it could be a skill-based outcome. But somewhere along the line, the child who's learning, personalization works as long as they're moving towards a path. So the school still is required, or the system is still required to have standards or objectives that children are able to, they need to achieve. And the personalization, the real benefit of this is, from just giving my personal experience as a student when I was younger, there was many times, and probably a number of people here, you were reading something, you were learning something, and you said to yourself, I am never going to use this in my life. Did anybody ever say that when you were a child? Yeah? Okay. Now, that objective is still a requirement, and it still needs to be a requirement. As much as we're a child, you don't like it, the truth of the matter is that 95% of what a school is making you learn is a skill that you really should have for life. And personalization, what it does is it allows children who maybe don't want to learn content in set A, but if you can modify the input to be something they're interested in, maybe a sport or a cultural activity, something that child has an interest in, then when that child actually starts learning, they're going to be following their own interest, and they're going to pick up that same skill in a number of different contexts. And if you can learn and see the same skill applied in 2 or 3 or 4 different contexts, you start to really think, wow, I do need this skill for life. And that's something that I think personalization and AI and recommendations of that content to the children can really make an impact on going in the near future, in the next 5 years, and then much more into the distant future.
So what will be the role of the teacher when these individualized path or recommendation systems are going to guide us what to teach? Because at that point, it's the policies that guide what we should study, how much, what is the interaction. So what is the role of the teacher in the future if we have these individualized path and recommendation systems guiding our education?
Kind of like Yoda from Star Wars. The teacher, in the traditional sense, the teacher is supposed to have all of the content and all of the rules and all of the requirements, and they're supposed to give these requirements and feed these to the students almost in a linear structure. The expectation is changing, and teachers will be providing more of a mentor. There will be a firm mentor, and they will make sure the students need to learn the standards and the objectives. But as part of that mentoring role, you are kind of following the child and guiding them. An example I would use that I've applied in the past to language learning, for anybody, this is Estonia, so I'm assuming most people here have learned a second language, right? Okay, good. So if you remember when you were learning your second language and you were not very good, you were young, your teacher gave you every single word, every grammar point, every sentence, and you couldn't do anything besides let the teacher guide you to the next point, to the next point, to the next point. But what happens is you reach a moment where your skill is starting to become good enough to self-learn and to self-guide. And the analogy I would give is like a sled dog. When you're younger, you're like the teacher's got to push you from the back. You can't guide yourself. But once you start becoming good at the language or good at the skill, you actually move to the front and you guide and you pull in the direction you're interested in. And the teacher's job becomes more to guide and navigate you and make sure that you're following the requirements. I think that the role of the teacher is going to change from more of a kind of the push mechanism that we have in the past to something of more of a mentor, coach, and kind of a guidance, following and making sure the student is achieving their objectives.
I agree very much that teacher as such is still needed in a classroom for a personal and emotional feedback for children's well-being. Teacher can have this emotional touch, and the technology is just very effective in doing some jobs of the teachers. And hopefully if AI really is going to work well, teachers will have more time to eye-to-eye contact with children, and they are not anymore overburdened with all those administrative tasks they complain about.
Yeah, this is the second problem that we hear in Estonia all the time, that our teachers don't have time to teach anymore. And the same thing is in health tech. Our doctors don't have time to cure people because they have to fill in some forms and send information to the central systems. Are there any applications already where machine learning technologies or data science is already benefiting our teachers, helping them to let them have more time for teaching, not for these admin things or not for assessment or evaluation? Are there any real life stories already?
Do you want to start?
From an AI
From an
component?
AI perspective.
For the administrative side, I'm not aware of many products that are really reducing the amount of work that teachers are putting into the administrative side. However, there have been a number of content management systems and learning management systems that have really made the efficacy of a teacher's administrative jobs, much greater. They're able to do much more work and retrieve and reduce times to retrieve content, plan lessons. Those types of things have happened, and it's reduced the amount of time per task. But much like anybody who works with a computer or software, the more software your company, your work gives you, the more work you get. So it doesn't matter. I mean, maybe one job has been largely automated, but then you get additional jobs because the expectations of teachers are growing with the introduction of some of the ed tech and the requirements. I'm not aware of any AI solutions that are solving the workload, but there are quite a few content management and learning management systems that have reduced the amount of time required for each task. But AI is not quite managing that yet.
Yes, there are plenty of examples, I think, overall, globally, for, yes, some parts of the teacher's job that have been automated. In Estonia, unfortunately, we really can't come up with very clear examples, although we run the national data collection from education system from 2004, so we actually have generated plenty of data. So if there are interested parties in the audience who would love to actually kind of come up with some creative solutions, then there are actually data sets available to kind of try out. But yes, there are kind of examples with simple chatbots who would be like an assistant either for teacher or for a student, reminding some kind of changes in a schedule or kind of reminding some other aspects of the learning process. There are such things already. But yeah, unfortunately not from Estonia at this stage.
Does that mean, what you're telling me, that the tools out there in the educational sector are still solving very small problems or challenges around education for the learners or for the teachers? And we talk a lot about this, and we see AI implemented in business, in entertainment, but it has not necessarily entered into education. Is that what you're telling me? Or what's the situation in the world and in Estonia?
Well, I think in this audience there are people who know that, for example, China has a very ambitious goals to become the most AI-savvy country by 2030, and they are also investing huge amounts of money into the education. And they claim that they also have AI-based tools to correct essays. And they are already using such complicated algorithms that actually developers themselves can't really explain exactly how it works. So that's a very important role of the teachers which are taken away, because assessment takes a huge amount of time of teachers' job.
But in that sense, whose job would it be to get more technologies in the educational sector? We here are startup people. We have a bunch of edtech startups here as well. I see you guys, and you can tell your perspective. But whose job is to drive the innovation in the education? Is it the job of the technologists? Is it the job of the entrepreneurs to come up with new solutions to very big challenges out there? Or is it more the responsibility of policymakers? Who should we point here? What do you think?
Well, I think that if there's an opportunity, it's going to be a combination of people who are willing to take risks and have a certain type of technological skill, that they're willing to chase the problem. However, with education, we're currently going through a phase of kind of refinement in some of the ed tech products that came out within the last 5 years. There was a quick rush of ed tech products because a lot of venture capital money went into the education industry, and people saw, wow, if money's going in, there's an opportunity, and a lot of companies rushed into it. But what happened was there were often a lot of technology-centered entrepreneurs or technology companies who went in and they started making these products and thought they had the solution, and maybe they did have the solution for the problem that they identified. But the problem they had identified wasn't exactly the problem that was going on in the schools, or didn't have the exact flexibility that teachers needed. So what we're going through now is a period where there were some products that were very, very successful, and people instantly recognized the quality of the products. However, there was also quite a bit of pushback from the teachers when the technology came in with the solutions, and the teachers kind of said, well, that's not the problem that we see. And over the last few years, you started to get more and more collaboration between the schools and the technology team. So in terms of responsibility, it's going to be not somebody's responsibility per se. It's going to be opportunity chasing. So entrepreneurs will probably be leading, but entrepreneurs will need to recruit and find the appropriate people from the education industry who understand education, understand the reality in the classroom, understand the requirements, but also are willing to take the risk of joining a startup and being an evangelist for the product in the schools. So some of the most successful products in education technology at the global level have actually recruited the teachers in and done a really good job of getting the teachers to influence back to other teachers, because the products really do work when they have collaboration with teachers and technology.
I think very much that for a product development, there has to be a very honest and good relationship and cooperation between the developers and the people from the school, teachers, who are actually really using the product. But I clearly also see the role of the national authorities, because in order to really get the full advantages and full value of the AI, that also means a lot of thinking and discussion how we need to change our current educational policies and instruments in order that the curricular is not just as it is at the moment in big chunks, but it has to be made into the smaller bits in order for them to be moved around, to have the whole assessment opportunities behind it. There has to be, for a greater good, there also has to be the discussion what actually needs to be in a curricular in an AI world. Do we really need to study all those things what have been included in the curricular for the last, 100 years? There are many kind of choices what needs to be done, and that's where actually everybody has to do its bit.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when we're talking here, everyone is measuring KPIs, and they want to see results, and students are measured. So what is the role of the education in the future, or even nowadays? Is it to have these very concrete skills and to make us study very quickly? Is it to produce us for the economy, to the future jobs, or is it to make us as critical thinkers?
That's a tough question.
It is, yeah. What do you think? Do we have here answers to these big questions? Can we get a mic here in the second row?
Thank you. I'm Tiit from Estonian Business School. In my mind, in this discussion, we should make a certain difference between educational levels. Maybe in some level, really, machine learning and customization means that you just find out the gaps in a preset knowledge or competence set, and then you fill it in. Indeed, if I have to study some foreign language, maybe less the case, even at university. But if we come to university level, then I think a very big challenge is critical thinking. And critical thinking is starting from searching in internet relevant information, filtering it, and making clear what are fake news, what are the real information sources. So I would look also for artificial intelligence solutions that support such activities. But I don't know, we use, for instance, at EBS, we use Canvas. Maybe we should use some other e-learning tool, but I haven't found it. I have found plagiarism detection tools and such things, but these which guide students to be critical about content, like search and filter in internet. I haven't found it. Maybe I have not done the perfect search.
Mm-hmm. Any other ideas? What is the goal of the future education? We have one hand at the back as well. Can you please?
Hey, my name is Mart. I'm an education innovator. And actually, I think we should start from the fundamental questions, like what exactly should be the skills that the students are learning in school? And there is a lot of dispute about the things that we are doing at the schools at the moment. We're training kids to sit still, not ask questions, and maybe this is not really the things that we should train for 12 years. But how AI could fit into this, there's of course a lot of answers, and you have pondered upon quite a few of them. We could actually make personalized, fully personalized learning available with this. But I don't believe that only the innovators can do this, and I also don't believe that only the policymakers can do this. I believe that this can be done when these guys are able to talk to each other and really make it happen together.
Okay, but we have talked about the challenges in the educational sector for some time now. We know that teachers don't have time and students have different learning paths. So still, whose responsibility is it that to drive the innovation? Yes, please.
Oh, okay. No, I actually want to continue with what he said.
Absolutely.
So I'm teaching people AI also, but I think that is a very broad question. But what AI would change, I think, is we would become more personal. AI, I would say, is humanization of computers. So far, technology was very technology. You had to adapt to technology. It was the same course for everyone. Everyone takes the same course, but people are not the same. You know, I come from India. We had a different system. We had a Gurukul system where the teacher understood each of the student. They would take different learning paths. I think AI would eventually lead there, where people taking the course would come with different outcomes. So it's a very broad question. Specific to what we do is we train entrepreneurs to create AI solutions. So in that sense, we have a specific goal. So within education, I think people would take different areas and go on optimizing in that area. If someone's in the school, they would have a different goal. Using AI, how should the student behave? For an entrepreneurial teacher, we would look like, is he able to make a startup? Is he able to compete with the world with this AI education? So I think AI, what would change is it would get very, it doesn't have to be one platform for all. That's where education will go with AI. It would just become like everyone starts in same, but doesn't come out same. It leads to, so AI will, until we come in with empathy built into the AI, where personalization happens much more on emotional level. I don't like this course, because this is what I learned after teaching for 2 years. I had a different, I'm actually an entrepreneur. I took up education only last 2 years back because I needed employees and I wasn't getting the right skills. So I got into education myself, training people. That's where I learned, oh, this is a different ball game altogether. You really have to be empathetic towards your people. And I asked them, why didn't you learn this online? All of that I'm teaching you in the class is already there online. They're like, I don't feel confident that maybe I'll complete this. You have a person there, people feel confident. This is what AI would be able to do. Oh, like you can interrupt, ask questions. If it's a video, you just have to see the whole video. People don't feel confident. People don't feel engaged completely. These things, I think education, when AI comes into education, these elements have to come in. People have to feel more connected. And the role of the teacher at that point would be just to be a part of the class and also learn with them, and probably be that extra layer of emotional support beyond what AI is doing. I think this is where.
Yeah, it's a very good perspective. That's probably, and it's a question why we haven't seen the classroom changing, because it has been like the past 100 years. We have one person, what is a teacher standing in front of the class educating 30 people. But yeah, AI can personalize that.
I would just say that I thought that was actually an excellent point. And the point that I thought was really good was AI would allow children to interact and ask questions and feel like they have the ability to get answers when they don't know something. And if you look at children who have access to support networks and teachers who are sitting down and engaging and feel comfortable asking questions, their academic performance is going to be significantly better than the child who doesn't ask questions, doesn't feel like he has somebody to talk to. And if AI can fulfill a role where children are just accustomed to having an answer given to them for questions, that will allow them to explore more about their own interests, their own passions, and develop themselves and become much better participants in society in the future.
We are here talking about the solutions of AI, and you told us about India, and I've read a lot about China, and you're representing Japan here. Are these solutions maybe more fit and more useful for the developing countries? where maybe the literacy is not that high level, and this voice recognition and speech recognition and all these other technologies can enhance the people who are already far behind. Maybe we're talking about our educators are focusing on the wrong markets, where there are more opportunities in other countries.
So some of the things that have surprised me the most is countries and areas where you would expect to have no ed tech ability because of resource limitations. Some of the most amazing innovations have actually happened in these places. India is one example where smartphones have taken over in a lot of cases. Those are the device. So if a family can't afford, or the school system can't afford to send a child to school with a computer, or they can't afford to have schools in the computers in the schools, then the parents are having one phone or so, and they're giving it to their child, and the child's going to school. And the teachers are making, and the companies are starting to produce quality education technology products that fit that market. Now, those might not be the products that fit the global market, but it's a thriving market that's growing. And areas where, like in Indonesia, Philippines, you're seeing a lot of places where you have small communities. So the mobile kind of, there's just a more mobile and distance kind of connectedness. So people are much more comfortable using these kind of devices in the classroom. So I think that it's a different type of development that's going on. But because there's a shift to mobile learning now, the quality of the products, it's only a few years behind that these children are also going to have access to a much fuller network of products through the same phones that they have currently. Questions?
Please.
Thank you. I actually wanted to emphasize this gentleman's point earlier that we really need more empathy within AI. But I also wanted to talk about and ask to everyone and the panelists, how do we prepare our students for the future? How do we truly make our students robot-proof? Thank you.
It's a good question.
Well, I think that the curricular and the learning process, yes, need to be more focusing to these general skills, socio-emotional skills, skills to cooperate, to have the opportunities to actually have a project-based learning experiences from the very early ages. And the most important thing is the curiosity, to kind of feed the curiosity that the people are ready to learn throughout the life. I think that's actually what is the task of the school in nowadays.
David, do you have an answer how to make our kids robot-proof?
Well, I think that the starting point is with educators being very open about the skills that they know they themselves don't have. If you don't have the skills into something that makes you personally feel insecure that maybe I'm going to be turned into a robot, those things that I know I'm lacking are things that the children I'm also teaching are lacking. So just starting to identify and be more open in discussing about the skills that the teachers don't have, the schools don't have. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the way that the society works. Things develop, technology comes and goes. So teachers need to be getting educated as well to understand what the requirements are for society, and also make sure that children are at least being pushed down a path that gives them exposure to the types of skills they might need. But I mean, robots could take over almost anything.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that all the children get exposure to learning some programming skills. I think that's something good what we've done in Estonia, that we give opportunity from very early ages. 40% of the kindergartens run some kind of a ICT simple opportunity for kids. 80% of the general education school, K-12, have some kind of kind of activities for developed ICT skills. So, I mean, the early exposure is important, but it doesn't mean that everybody ends up working in ICT. I mean, many actually get the first experience and know that this is something they don't want to do later in their life. but yeah, having the exposure, the experience, and actually the mindset that you can solve the problems with some of those tools, that's important.
Still would like to a bit intrigue you about these two last letters, artificial intelligence. So can you give me some really good best practice in education you have found where artificial intelligence really works? Why I ask this? Okay, I have visited many companies' websites as a client, and I haven't found so far any bot which is smarter than even a low-paged customer service person in understanding my needs. And then I have once been at Machu Picchu, and then I get each month some cheap flights to Lima, although I don't need it because I have been at Machu Picchu already.
Okay, thank you.
So can you give, from not for travel, but just what we should study in order to understand the opportunities of artificial
Language training probably is the best example I can give at the moment.
But some specific software?
Well, the Estonian linguist or Estonian international linguist would be one, and actually, I mean, there are people here in the audience who could get a business opportunity now to actually introduce how it works and how efficient it is. I've used it myself. It is interesting learning experience. There are other similar applications around, but to be honest, I think it takes time and technology to develop in order to really make a real contribution to the learning process and have solutions that can be easily used and instead of teacher. So that takes long years.
I'd like to just make a quick point. I think that you asked a really good question. And I think that in terms of, if you look at an adult teacher engaging with the child and you just look at that relationship, then yes, I think that adult teacher who has the skills is probably going to outperform AI with that child in almost every situation. There are two categories of product that I think that AI has done a very good job. One is with literacy and kind of level-based content. So there are a lot of education products that are being developed. Some have already been released. Newzella is one that's in the US that's quite good. And what these products do is they take content and they adjust the same content at multiple levels for the user. And then different users can read the same content at different levels. So they all feel that nobody's excluded. They're all able to meet the course requirements. Another one that's a good example is mathematics, and specifically in mathematics with younger children. Pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first grade, up to about third grade if you look at the mathematic curriculum up to about third grade, it is relatively linear. You learn point A first, point B, so kids don't jump around and learn different types of math. You go in a relatively straight line. And the reason I bring mathematics up is by grade 3, if children are not performing in mathematics by grade 3, they have serious kind of repercussions going all the way through university. And so there are some products that have been developed for mathematics that they're good at giving multiple questions and reiterating content for children to personalize it and to keep pulling them back on their weak points. But the part that's really good about this type of content for mathematics is giving teachers a visualization of 30 kids, and maybe for each child in the class, there could be 30 or 40 or 50 mathematics skills, and you can color code and see a time series of who's doing what and how they're improving over time. And that's really powerful, and the teacher never can do that without having the AI recommendations. And then the content, if the teachers keep using the same content, it will keep level correcting the children who are struggling. And then over a 5 or 6 or 7 week period, you can see these time series, the children who are struggling, the reds are becoming yellows, are becoming light green, are becoming dark green by the end of the course. And that is something that a teacher would have, you grade them on day one, and the next time you teach the next set of skills, the next set of skills. So to answer your question, one-on-one, I would say yes, a teacher should be able to outperform an AI in the current format. Across a classroom or across a school, There really are those types of advancements taking place. So that's a slightly different approach that I would take to looking at the impact of AI on education.
We have only 1 minute, but one topic I wanted to touch upon is, can we still justify bringing tech and AI into education? If we look at the massive online open courses, and I believe most of you have taken a course there. Please raise your hand if you have. And how many of you have finished the courses, getting a certificate? Or skip it. So, well, the stats is, you are smart here, you finished, but the stats is a little bit worse. 96% of the students don't finish the courses. So what is the problem there? Because everyone is enthusiastically studying online, taking part of these courses, at least a part of the models. But 96% don't finish. Why is the retention so low? Can AI perhaps enhance that? Do we need more to hold hand of the students? Or maybe these students don't even have to finish the courses. They just take the skills they want.
In one just real quick sentence, because we're out of time, the credentials need to mean something. So at the end of the course, if that certificate or that completion has actual tangible meaning in society, you'll finish the course. If it has no meaning, if it's just a certificate that you tuck into a folder and leave on your desk at home, like I have one in that same location, then there's no meaning to the course, and the chances of not completing it go to that 96% range.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also very much a matter how the courses are kind of built up, how they are structured. But yes, the hard statistics is really that the most of the people drop out. But David's point is very, very much true, that if you don't need a certificate because you are already with higher qualification with university degree, which is usually the case for those courses, that people who are already educated, they take it for their personal interest, for the gratification, and they actually don't need the credentials. So it really is very pragmatic.
Yes, let's take the final first question here, and then unfortunately we need to leave. Please.
Thank you for the discussion. I have a question for Heli, actually. We have been discussing the education technology in a very broad sense and discussed the opportunities, but what are the specific milestones that HITSA wants to reach in Estonian education, say in 3 or 5 years, when we talk about preparing for the era of AI?
They are not connected with AI at this point, but we have a very concrete goal, for example, by 2020 in our own organizational strategy, and the Ministry of Education actually expects us to deliver it already by this fall, is that all Estonian schools would have offer opportunity to students to study informatics. All Estonian students. So that's a very ambitious goal, and there are some programs also to support it, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay, thank you everyone. Preet is sending us away from the stage.